Please welcome Corporate Vice President, Head of Product, Developer Division, Amanda Silver.
Hello. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Build 2023. I'm Amanda Silver. I'm the Head of Product for Microsoft's Developer Division. And I can't tell you how excited I am to be here with all of you today in person to talk about developer experience and how much better it's going to get, radically better, with the power of cloud and artificial intelligence. You know, early on in my career, I discovered that my personal mission, what motivates me every single day, is to help developers and their teams unleash their ingenuity so they can build the stuff that matters. As developers, we all do this by getting inspired by who we're building for. My team and I are inspired by you, developers, so we continually strive to make it easier for you to go from a concept to code to your customer. We know that developers and their teams are burning time and energy and creative bandwidth on adapting to hybrid-first environments, dealing with operational toil, like responding to the latest security vulnerability that may or may not be exploitable in your code, encountering engineering systems friction, like waiting for automated tests to pass or waiting for the compiler to just compile already, and getting sidetracked by constant distractions and interruptions. We work on ensuring that you and your teams can focus on writing the code that only you can write. We know that being a happy and a successful developer depends on your ability to get into that sweet spot, get into that flow, get into that zone. So today, we're going to talk about how we're using the power of the cloud and AI to advance 3 key areas to help you and your teams achieve more dev and less ops, more focus and less frustration, more intelligence and innovation and less iteration. First, I want to dive into how we're tackling this for the individual developer experience. And what I really mean by that is how the latest additions to our tools and services can really help you improve your day-to-day life as a developer, freeing you up so you can focus on the more creative aspects of product making. Over 38 million developers write their code in one of the Visual Studio family of products each month. We've grown from a primarily .NET and C++ user base to having premier tools for Node and Python and Java and more. And it's the tight feedback loops with real developers like you in mind that's allowed us to improve our products. At the same time, the complexity of distributed cloud applications connecting to multiple clients and an increasingly hostile security environment means that you're being asked to master many, many more domains. So we've integrated AI into our IDEs. We're innovating in dimensions of the developer experience that we believe will help you move more fluidly. We want onboarding times to be minimal, and we want it to be easier to learn new domains. Generating boilerplate code and adopting best practices should be less taxing and time-consuming, and we want to help you quickly understand your context so that you can diagnose issues right away. This is really what allows you to focus on what matters most, building great software that makes a difference for your organization and your end customers. We first previewed GitHub Copilot in partnership with OpenAI back in June 2021, and we're already seeing its effects on the end-to-end developer experience. When we put Copilot to the test, we found that developers were able to move through their workflows significantly faster than before, and we even heard from folks that it's allowed them to code at the speed of thought, which is pretty incredible. But more importantly, developers using GitHub Copilot say that they're happier and more fulfilled because of it, and that's really what it's all about. So we're keeping the momentum going. As we continue to innovate, we're evolving GitHub Copilot into a readily accessible AI assistant throughout the entire developer lifecycle. And with that, I want to ask Leslie Richardson to join me on stage to show you how all of this works in the latest version of Visual Studio. Leslie? That's great.
Thanks, Amanda, and hi, everyone. So in this demo, I'm going to share a recording of one of my colleagues' recent experiences onboarding to a new project and how GitHub Copilot helped him ramp up on his work quickly. So let's get started. So GitHub Copilot gives you new and powerful conversational AI experience in Visual Studio, going beyond the basic code completions in favor of insights into your code, such as analysis, explanations, and my personal favorite, code fixes. I can easily ask Copilot questions in my natural language, in line with my code, and using that code context, Copilot will give me smart analysis and suggestions. On top of all this, Visual Studio teams up to gather the right context to help me form some good questions in order to get some great answers. So let's take a look at an example. So Mark is a new developer. He's just joined this team. He just joined our team, and he's working on a podcast app. This app consists of a bunch of different components, including ASP.NET Core, Blazor, Maui, Playwright, among other things. And one of the first tasks that Mark has been given is having to update this class called Podcast Update Handler. But because he's new to this code base, he's going to ask Copilot, what in the world does this class even do? And sure enough, using the Copilot chat feature, Copilot will give him a brief overview of what this class is in the context of the larger project, allowing him to quickly ramp up on what this class is and be able to engage with his more experienced teammates. From there, he needs to go ahead and start updating this get new episodes method so that there aren't any UI conflicts. And as he starts to write his for each block, you'll notice that Copilot already starts to give him code completion suggestions based around the collection that he's referencing in the line previous. So after accepting that, he can then start to write his if statement, and once again, he'll get an additional completion suggestion based around the object's properties. So he can choose which property that he needs for this particular scenario, as well as the pattern that most suits him. Again, because he's new to this code base, he's also going to ask Copilot, how would you go about calling this method? And Copilot will give him some scenarios as to how to best call handle update async. But because he also wants to get ahead on some bugs, he also proceeds to ask Copilot, but what could possibly go wrong with this method? And not only can Copilot tell him a couple issues that can arise, he can then ask Copilot to just rewrite this entire method for him without, in a way that will address all of those issues. And just by hitting the insert button, he can drag and drop this entire block of code, in this case a try-catch block, into his code that addresses all of those problems. So from there, the next thing he wants to do is validate his code and make sure everything's working. So he's going to add some unit tests with the help of Copilot. And as he starts to tell Copilot to add some unit tests, you'll notice Visual Studio gives him a pre-generated question that he can use instead of having to type all that by himself. And sure enough, Copilot gives him a full series of unit tests just based off of that one command, including the mocking up of a key service. So just to sum up what just happened here, Mark was able to quickly learn up on a class and how it worked, identify and fix issues that could possibly go wrong within that code, write a whole series of unit tests, all with the help of Copilot, and it's not even the end of his first day on the job. How sweet is that? So Copilot can also come in clutch when it comes time to diagnose and debug your issues. So because Mark finished that first task so quickly with the help of Copilot, his next one is to start investigating and testing out some workflows. And along the way, he encounters an object disposed exception, which he's seen before, but he doesn't know what that means in the context of this particular scenario. So Copilot to the rescue. And Copilot will not only tell him what this exception means, but also the specifics of what's going on. So in this case, he's trying to access an object that's already been disposed of. And to fix it, he simply needs to change his method from async void to async task. So another issue that he's experiencing involves having to diagnose some issues that's returning unexpected values from some signal processing math. But why is this happening? He's not familiar with NaN either, so asking Copilot again what all of this means, not only will Copilot tell him what NaN or not a number means, but because Copilot has access to his debugging context at that particular point in time, Copilot is able to give him a contextual explanation with specific problematic variables and values. So he can get the exact issue and scenario that best suits his particular needs without having to go to Stack Overflow or without having to wait for that call from a teammate for help. And again, he can simply ask Copilot to rewrite that method so that that issue no longer occurs. So at this point, you're probably wondering, how is Mark able to do this with what appears to be such a large solution and a device, in his case, that's tailored for portability and battery life? How is he able to be so productive? Well, if you've been paying attention, that's because Mark has been using a Microsoft dev box. So Mark has been given a pre-configured dev box from our team with all of the tools and specifications that he needs to complete his work. This includes, in his case, a lot of RAM, a fast SSD, and the latest version of Visual Studio Enterprise. Mark also works on several projects across his org, each having their own unique tools and dependencies. And in turn, each dev box that he uses has its own project-specific configuration, making it very easy to onboard and making it easy to quickly swap back and forth between each project that he has. This also means he gets to skip that fun first week on the job of having to get past all of those initial setup roadblocks that everyone loves, right? And he can also create a new dev box from a list of pre-configured projects to start fresh and isolate his work. So of course, when Visual Studio comes into play when it comes to DevBox, it is tailor-made for it, especially in terms of performance. Visual Studio takes advantage of features such as perf catching, single sign-on, and unified settings. So you can have the same productive experience in Visual Studio within a DevBox as you would on your local machine. So as you can see, both DevBox and GitHub Copilot can help you become lots more productive and ramp up on projects and new concepts quickly. So make sure you try them both out today if you're not already. And thanks, y'all. So back to you, Amanda.
Thanks, Leslie. I can't even tell you how excited I am about all these new use cases for AI assistants. They're all just so helpful. GitHub Copilot is already available to every organization, regardless of whether or not you use GitHub as your source code repository. And if you're here today in person, you'll get early access to Copilot chat, so be sure to scan that QR code and get access to it. And make sure you also have the latest version of Visual Studio, which, in addition to the editor performance improvements and new debugging features, it will also gather all of the right context so that you can form those good questions to get the most out of Copilot chat. Using Visual Studio and Copilot together is really what's going to deliver the best developer experience. Now, as Leslie mentioned, all of that magic in Leslie's demo happened inside of a Microsoft dev box. One of the biggest pain points in starting a new project or getting going on a new team is setting up your dev environment. And I'm sure that at one point or another, you've all experienced the frustration that comes with spending an entire day, or even sometimes more, on machine setup before you even get to coding. Cloud-based environments like Microsoft DevBox and GitHub Codespaces make it so much easier to start contributing to your team's code base right away, regardless of where you are or what machine you're working with, and without compromising on security. All that is to say, Leslie showed us what a fantastic individual developer experience can look like. But now, we're living in a hybrid first world where dev teams are expected to work together even when they're not together live. This means that our technology needs to work harder to keep complicated processes simple and streamlined so that they can accelerate developer velocity. And we need consistency in our environments to make sure that we're maintaining quality. So I want to spend some time talking about how we can set up the kind of super productive developer experience that Leslie showed us with a sound infrastructure that teams can easily scale and replicate. Let's start by talking about what Microsoft DevBox means for teams. Earlier, we talked about how complicated it can be to set up your environments, and this really simplifies that process so that it's amortized across the entire team. Microsoft DevBoxes can be tailored on a project-by-project basis so that it has the latest updated source code and build artifacts, and that makes onboarding new developers a matter of minutes as opposed to days. And DevBoxes are cloud PCs built on Windows 365, so it comes with anywhere access and secure management through Intune and Microsoft Endpoint Manager. It's self-service for developers, so they can request additional machines for elastic environments while ensuring that the environments remain isolated and secure. And it's also cost-optimized for developer scenarios with hibernation and timed and triggered shutdown functionality that allows you to pay for only what you use. But you all know that there's a lot more to building an application than just setting up the necessary SDKs and tools in a dev box. Building modern cloud-native apps requires a developer to create everything that the app depends on, which can be super complicated. What we're showing here is pretty typical for an application. If I was a new developer joining the team and I had to set up this environment on my own, it would be pretty easy for me to make a mistake or to open up a security hole. The enterprise I work for probably doesn't want me to have this much control over all of the resources, and it's also not exactly how I want to be spending my time. So how do we increase the productivity and the quality for hybrid development teams at scale? We build on the best practices of GitOps with Azure deployment environments. Azure deployment environments make it easy to implement GitOps by tightly integrating Git-based version control, pull request workflows, and automated deployments. And this really helps maintain a reliable, consistent, and auditable deployment process, and it improves collaboration, and it promotes best practices within development teams. And here's what it looks like in action. Starting with the dev infrastructure, platform engineers curate environment templates and map projects to Azure subscriptions, identities, and permissions based on their environment type. From there, dev teams then assign their developers the templates they need to work on projects. Developers can then deploy those environments on demand through a dev portal or the CLI, or they can deploy them automatically through their CI/CD pipeline. Regardless of how the environment is deployed, the resources are automatically routed to the relevant Azure subscription, whether that's a test, development, or production subscription. Now I'm going to have Shayne Boyer join me on stage to show you a little bit of what I'm talking about. Shayne?
All right. All right, good morning. All right, so in our first demo, we showcased the power of dev boxes, and developers can quickly start using those pre-configured machines in the cloud equipped with essential tools like Visual Studio. In the same way that dev boxes provide that pre-configured development machine, deployment environments provide that complete set of infrastructure necessary to run that application workload. And just like dev boxes, deployment environments can be self-served through the developer portal, and they can even be created via the command line and used for your pipelines. Using deployment environment, devs don't have to learn all the ins and outs of Azure and potentially creating the wrong resources or over-provisioning infrastructure or even misconfiguring a service, inadvertently creating a security exposure. So here I am in what Mark started with in these dev boxes, and I'm gonna go over to the podcast app. And as a platform engineer, when you set up a project, you're really configuring that self-serve capability that enables those developers to build and experiment quickly. So we talked about a little bit about dev pools. So how easy is it to set up one of those boxes for our dev pools? So here, I've got a number here. I'm gonna go ahead and create one in our portal. And first off, I'm just gonna set up a name, and we'll just call this maybe front end, VS. And we need to make sure that we follow our naming conventions. And then next, we have our dev box definition. And now the dev box definition, here, it really defines our CPU, RAM, and the base image and size that we're gonna have for the box. This would include things like Visual Studio, 256 megs of RAM, things like that. We probably want gigs. And then next, we have our network connection, and this is going to define our location, where we're at, maybe where our developers are at, our resources, et cetera. And you'll notice that some of these here actually define a VNet. This is sometimes we need access to our local resources on-prem if we're connecting to those. And then we want to look at what's the type of privileges that we want that particular user to have. A standard local user or an administrator. There might be some additional resources that they need to install on the machine, tooling, et cetera, to do their job. And then as Amanda mentioned previously, we want to control those costs and shut down those boxes when they're not in use. So if I'm setting a stop time here, maybe in San Diego, my developers might be in Zurich, I want to shut that down when they're done with their workday so that those machines just aren't spinning in the cloud, costing me money as a platform engineer in my company. And then finally, these machines are automatically enrolled into Intune, and they're managed using the same policy you use for any of the other devices on your network. So we'll cancel all that. All right, next we'll talk about our environment types. And you'll notice I've got a dev, test, and prod environment, and those are assigned to the subscriptions in my particular company here. And up until now, we've talked a lot about giving developers a way to self-serve those development machines. But what about all that infrastructure that the developers need to run that application? As platform engineers, you enable developers to create that infrastructure needed using the deployment environments. Now, a deployment environment type is a definition of the set of Azure resources, and those are specified using infrastructure as code or IAC templates like ARM or Bicep or Terraform. And these templates, they live in a Git-based repository, and they can be added to a project. And this enables our developers to create that infrastructure that they need through the developer portal and through their workflow. I can simply add that. Now, I might have a new front-end team that's coming onto our project, the podcast app, and they're gonna be working on the front end. And I wanna make sure that their work is assigned to the proper subscription. I obviously have access to a lot of subscriptions here. And I wanna make sure that they have the right role when they're doing their work. I might only want them to be a contributor on a specific subscription. And then I can add additional access or tags based on those particular roles. So I can really control their work based on the type of jobs that they're performing.
And the tag kind of allows you to actually track like the project that they're working on as well, right?
Correct, and I can do some queries and things in dashboards and kind of watch the workflow of that work and cost control as well.
Awesome.
All right, so finally, after I've added that, we want to look at our actual environments. We talked a lot about the infrastructure. You showed a very scary map of the infrastructure for the podcast app.
Yeah.
And how do I control that when somebody's doing that work to make sure that everything is spun up for them and they're not doing too many key vaults or too many, I don't know, Azure container apps. It's gonna cost us money. So what we do is we've set this up here for them, and for the podcast project, we've configured a DevOps task to create a new deployment for each branch that creates that isolated collection of infrastructure for that development. If they do a PR, we wanna make sure that we run that through a load test and make sure we meeting certain SLAs. And then when that's all done, that gets burned down or taken out of the infrastructure and it's not costing us extra money.
Awesome, so the developer doesn't really have to think about taking that infrastructure down.
Just have to check in code.
Awesome.
And that enables us to effectively manage our environment and really increases our developer velocity.
Awesome.
Cool, thanks.
Thank you, Shayne. Well, I'm excited to announce, thanks. I'm excited to announce that Microsoft DevBox is ready for you now, and it'll be generally available in July of this summer. And we've already got over 10,000 of our internal engineers at Microsoft using Microsoft DevBox in our team today. And they're loving it because they're able to switch between projects seamlessly and do their jobs efficiently without the operational toil that usually comes with maintaining a machine. And as Shayne mentioned, Azure deployment environments deliver consistency and security and great self-service developer experience, and they're generally available now. And best of all, there's no cost to use Azure deployment environments. You just pay for the underlying Azure resources that you use. So go check it out. Now, before we move on, I do want to take a minute to just show you a quick example from General Motors that shows how all this technology is helping their teams take things to the next level.
GM's purpose is to pioneer innovation that moves and connects people to what matters.
We're adding so many different new products and services. The need to be able to get people up to develop quickly is becoming more and more important every day.
We have to make sure they have the right tools, the process, the security.
The Microsoft Developer Cloud to us is that all-in-one solution.
Copilot is something we just rolled out. We have 400 plus GM developers using it.
The developers love it. They put comments in your code, and Copilot provides you with example code in the context of your application. So it really understands your application and what you've been writing.
And it lets us speed up a lot of that boilerplate process. Get you 98% of the way there. That's been a big productivity boost for them.
What DevBox allows you to do that we couldn't do before is really get the developer ready to develop within a day. So all the tools, all the capabilities connected to all the endpoints they need to do their job.
Each DevBox can be configured with a different set of tools. So if you are working on multiple assignments, we have been assigned with multiple DevBoxes.
Azure deployment environment is part of the DevBox portal. We are using the infrastructure as code within the deployment environment. Say, I want an environment to test out once I'm ready. I can do it with Azure deployment environment. I can spin up that environment. Team can come in and test their code, make sure it's all ready before I move to production.
to innovate new capabilities that really connect people to things that matter, you have to be with the partner who thinks with a developer mindset. That makes Developer Cloud a really good choice for us.
I just love that video. I love hearing how Microsoft DevBox and Azure deployment environments are helping the GM team onboard their developers faster, automate their mundane tasks, and scale in a way that has real impact for customers. We've talked about how collaboration between developers and operations teams really leads to faster software delivery. DevOps combines people and processes and technology to deliver continuous value to users. DevSecOps is the evolution of DevOps, where companies adopt security-first mindset by putting security into every phase of the development lifecycle, from design to delivery. DevSecOps is really more important than ever given the prevalence of open source. 99% of enterprises use open source, and 80 to 90% of modern software supply chains are made up of open source. While this gives teams incredible common foundation to build on top of, it also means that they've invited thousands of developers into their code base, but they probably don't really have great visibility into who they've invited and how secure that code is. Quite simply, you really can't have DevOps without the holistic security and peace of mind that comes with DevSecOps. And we're applying that paradigm even further across security and resilience and the overall quality of your customers' experiences. So Shayne is going to join me one more time to show you all how we can extend this practice so that we can catch issues earlier in the development lifecycle. Shayne?
Hi, I'm back. All right.
All right.
Okay, so what we did in the first one, we kind of talked about a little bit of how we set up all of these boxes to make the developer productive.
Yeah.
And now, as a developer, I want to make sure that all of that stuff is set up and has security and my productivity and all of the quality things are set up for us.
Right. So you were wearing like a different shirt a minute ago.
I was a platform engineer, now I'm a developer.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
Changing roles on the team. Okay, so for the podcast app, what we've done is we've actually partnered with a third-party service to customize the category text and description based on a specific user. So by tailoring that content, we're kind of hoping that we can get some more subscribers to our service.
That makes sense.
Okay, so I've got our Visual Studio here, and I'm actually going to look for our little HTTP code that I'm looking for our, here we go. All right, so category client here. And what I've got is this actually will invoke our category client, that third-party service, pretty simple HTTP client. I'm gonna go over to my categories API and uncomment that code that I was testing earlier. Make sure I use the right keyboard. Got a lot of things going on back here. All right. Now that I've got that code in there, I'm just gonna go over to our Git changes, and I'm just gonna say add my category service. And I'm gonna check in that code, and because my platform engineering team set up that CI system for us, it'll scaffold out all of that production system stuff that I need. It replicates there and run our stuff for us. So I'm gonna go ahead and commit my changes and push, and that should do that stuff for us, which is really great. Mm-hmm. So we'll just wait for that to happen.
Shayne, I got you on here in front of thousands of people to do a demo, and there's like a failure.
I'm sorry. Yeah, come to build, do a demo. It'll be awesome. Let me go to my source control. This is not embarrassing. All right.
It looks like the push was rejected because...
Look at that. It says checking for credentials and other secrets. Push was rejected because it contains one or more secrets. I didn't see a secret in there.
I didn't either.
All right, so it says program CS line 25. All right, so let's go back over there. Let's look at line 25. That's wrong scroll wheel. Look at that. So 25.
But it's commented.
It's commented out. So we actually have GitHub, the Azure Security DevOps set up, right? Mm-hmm. And what it does is it actually scans our code, kind of a pre-flight check, and says, you have a key here. Gotcha. And it's not gonna let us check in. Nobody's ever checked in a key before, right? Mm-hmm. But I know when I've done it here, I get a ton of emails, I've got to roll back things, I got to figure out how to do all my Git history and thousands of command line things I've got to do. So what I can do now is I'm just going to actually remove that from our code. We'll just delete that. How about that? I'll make sure I save my file.
That should solve it, right?
I'm gonna fix it.
Easy.
Yeah, fixed. Sorry about that.
No more
Sorry
secret.
About delay. And I'll commit and push that. Cool. Now we should be good, right?
Yep.
Good to go. We're pushing. Sorry for the delay. Okay, so the Azure DevOps Advanced Security is even smart enough to look at our history.
The Git history.
The Git history. So it knows that it's actually back there in the back, and we would commit that, and somebody could actually scaffold our history as well and snag that key and do bad things, right?
Gotcha.
And sniff out our secret. So if we're not stopping these accidental leaks, right, we have a lot of production work we have to roll back, revoking things, it's time, it's money, it's a pain. So we don't want to do that. So luckily, Visual Studio allows us to look at all of our commits. I can see that I got these two here, so what I'm going to do is I will double click both of those, right? And I can just right click. Let's just do a squash. And let's change this to add cat service, something like that. We'll hit squash. Now I can push that. Now everything should be happy, I hope.
Awesome.
Oh,
So it's
good.
really cleaned up now.
Well, now
That's
it's
great.
never existed in our history, and I can actually go, I don't want to move icons, but what I want to do is go and look at our pipeline. So these are the pipelines that we've set up, and if I actually refresh this here, we can see now I've got my add cat service, it's running, it's gonna kick off all of that infrastructure scaffolding for us, which is really cool. Now that's gonna take some time, right? So what I wanna actually do is, I'm thinking that's pretty good. So I'm gonna go back to Visual Studio, and we'll just create a PR. So I'll click that pull request, and I'll just put in my initials, because that should be good enough for me. I'll create that. Now what that's gonna do, since on our PR branch, we've created enough rules, we've put our rules here so that we want it to run through an actual load test.
Gotcha. So
Right.
basically, like, there's kind of a developer inner loop that does CI and things like that, and then the push to make sure that you don't push something like a secret, but then you even have a further kind of set of tests that you want to run as you get closer to production.
Yeah, so any PRs, we want to make sure that's going to mirror our actual production environment. So we want to make sure, obviously, we're hitting our quality gates and stuff
Gotcha.
like that. So now that's going to take, again, some time, because there's a lot of infrastructure for us to scaffold, more time we have today, about 15 minutes or so. So what I want to do is, let's go check out one that one of our colleagues done in the past when he was running through some additional tests. So he's got, it looks like on another branch, adding these customizations. And we look at the deployment, and what we're looking here is that actually we're using the Azure Developer CLI, and that scaffolds out everything. He could have done this on the command line with the AZD up, but we're using it also in our pipeline, and it ran that load test. And unfortunately, looks like it failed. So if I zoom in here, looks like we had a quality gate that we wanted a response time of 900 on those calls. We're hitting 21,000, not so great. I'm not a performance person. It's been some time since I've been doing this.
Yeah.
So,
Do you want me to, I'm actually kind of familiar with load testing. Do you want me to check
good.
it out?
I think that falls in your
Okay.
group.
So I think if we just look at the load testing that's in progress here, then we should be able to scroll down and see the results. And yep, we can actually see here that this is where the regression
Spike,
happened,
yeah.
and it's in the get categories API, right?
That's that code I wrote.
Yep, that was what you were working on. So if we go back to Visual Studio and we go to the categories API.
I think it's in a program CS
Yeah,
where we
there we are.
implemented it, right? I
Yeah,
think
so it's
down
39, is that what it was?
We're looking at line 37, I think it was.
Okay.
Yep, right there.
Yeah, there we are. Okay. So this is basically where we had the code that caused the performance regression,
Yeah,
right?
that category client I think needs to be a little bit more resilient. But
So
I'm not-
I don't really know this code base very well,
It's been a minute since I've written that.
but I'm kind of thinking maybe we can actually ask Copilot here.
There's some
So-
videos today I saw.
So I'm just going to ask, how can we make a category client, category client more resilient?
Yeah, I bet it's not even going to care if we spell anything right.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure I spelled something
All right.
wrong there.
Let's see here.
All right, let's see what it says.
Drum roll. Holy
Oh,
smokes, look at all
wow.
that. So it says to use poly.
Wow,
Gives us some code here.
awesome.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. So should we just take this and insert it in
Maybe
there?
if we ask, like, can you add poly to category client for us? Let's see.
Let's see. This is live code, people.
Holy smokes.
All right, that's awesome. Okay, so let's just go ahead and insert that. And yes,
Where did it insert it?
it inserted it down below. This right here.
Let's
think we don't
let's
need-
copy that.
Okay,
And we'll just paste it on line 30, where were we at? We're at 38
there we
maybe?
are. There we are.
Throw it on 38.
Okay.
See what happens there.
Okay, and then we can just comment out this one.
Yeah, sure. And we'll go ahead and check in those
We'll
code,
go ahead and check it in,
and we'll see if it fails.
and we can check it out.
Make sure we put a comment in our,
Yep. Fixed Shayne's slow code. All right. Give it all.
I might not be
That
back
works?
next year. Cool.
All right. So now we should be able to go back to the load test, right? And
Yeah.
see kind of what kicks off. And if we go back,
Oh,
I'm in the wrong
other
browser.
window?
Other window. Thank you very
Yeah.
much. If we go back to the pipelines, do we want to go to
That
this-
first one, and we
this
can see it
first one,
kicking
and
it off
can
if
see
we
it
refresh, I
actually
think.
refreshing. Yeah.
Yeah, so we've got a
So now
new
we can
load
actually
run.
see it's running again.
It's gonna,
Uh,
yeah, PR automated for 102. It's probably gonna running through some additional runs.
Awesome.
And we can look at Mark's previous run,
Yeah,
I
we
think,
can
too.
look at this one to see a passing load test. And we can go ahead and click on the load test just to see kind of what that looks like.
That was one that got skipped, but I think if we look at this other tab,
This one here.
Yeah,
There we go.
cool.
There we go. There we go.
Load
so we
test.
can go to the load test, and then we can see the, here we are, load test right there. And if we scroll down, we can actually see that
Look at that,
this is an
530.
example that passed. So it's really easy to basically just kind of use load testing in your CI/CD pipeline so that you can actually make sure that you have all of both the quality and security checks
Yeah.
that we had in this demo.
and when it's all done and that PR gets merged, all the infrastructure that got spun up goes away. I don't have to, as a developer, have to worry about clicking things in a portal and trying to figure out what I'm not supposed to touch.
Just yet another headache that you don't have to think about so you
Exactly.
can focus on writing code.
That's right.
Awesome.
Perfect.
Thanks,
Thanks.
Shayne. Cool. So Shayne's demo highlighted secret scanning, but GitHub Advanced Security for Azure DevOps also offers code scanning and dependency analysis so that you can detect and remediate the most common kinds of code security issues. GitHub Advanced Security for Azure DevOps is available as a public preview starting today. And Azure load testing, which we made generally available earlier this year, it really helps you ensure quality at scale. And it works with both Azure pipelines and GitHub Actions. And for those of you who are familiar with load testing already, you can upload your existing Apache JMeter scripts, which makes it really easy to get started. So we've talked a lot about how we're improving your individual developer experience and how we're accelerating your team's velocity. We've also talked about how this leads to happier developers who are more satisfied with their work, and that's because when we cut down on developer toil and improve efficiency across teams, we free up more time to create and innovate. Satya, Kevin, and Scott all talked about some truly mind-blowing AI-enabled apps, and while it might seem complicated at first glance, I really want you all to know just how easy it is to make any app an intelligent app. In fact, if you've got an API, you're already ready to go. The application that we showed in that last demo has a set of public APIs behind it. The podcast API is the main API that feeds the website and the app's data. And it also takes requests for new podcast submissions from users. Instead of processing the podcasts on the main API, it adds an item into a queue for the ingestion worker to handle. The ingestion worker is a background worker service that just listens to this feed submission queue, and it analyzes all of the submissions to see if they're valid and what category they should be in. And then it inserts it appropriately if it's valid, or it fires off other webhooks to notify other clients. The podcast updater API is really the simplest of all of the services. It's the background worker service that updates the podcast's feed from the internet, and it updates the database with all of this information. So let's take one of those APIs and build an intelligent app. I'm going to hand it over to Isidor Nikolic, who's going to show you just how easy it is to integrate this into your intelligent ecosystem.
Thank you, Amanda.
Hey, Izzy,
it's
welcome.
great to be here. Thank you, thank you. So what we have here is the Open API docs page of our podcast API that you just talked about. And we have multiple endpoints listed here, and one of the endpoints is the shows endpoint. And we can go ahead, we can just try it out. And it gives us the list of our tech podcasts.
Right, right, exactly.
And Amanda, how awesome would it be if we surface this data directly from ChatGPT?
That would be amazing.
It would be pretty awesome, right? So let's go ahead, let's do that. For that, we need the ChatGPT plugin. And luckily, ChatGPT plugins are nothing more than web APIs.
It sounds kind of intimidating, but when you say it's just a web API, that sounds a lot simpler.
Yeah, it's just a web API, and that's exactly what I have here. I have here a TypeScript Express web API that is talking to our podcast app, which is running on Azure. But instead of us explaining it, let's go ahead, let's ask Copilot to explain this app to us. Cool. Thank you, Copilot. And one of the things which Copilot nicely noticed is that we're using the Open API specification. This is just a standard way to document our endpoints. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at that. Here we see our endpoints documented, and one of the endpoints is the shows endpoint. It just returns a list of shows. But let's go back to our index.ts. And you can see, Amanda, I was trying to use the nice async await pattern everywhere, but how silly of me, I missed one spot. So I'm using the outdated promises then here.
Yeah, that's kind of old school TypeScript right there.
Yeah, but let's not refactor this live. Let's ask Copilot to help with this, right?
Sure.
And in VS Code, we want to bring AI at your fingertips. And that's why we're looking at experimenting with combining the VS Code Quick Open and GitHub Copilot. And this is how that experience looks like. Let's just go ahead and let's ask Copilot to rewrite this to use async await.
Awesome.
Awesome. Thank you, Copilot. So let's just go ahead. Let's just take this. This is picture perfect. And now all my methods are using the same async await everywhere. We didn't have to do anything, right? But let's go back to making this a ChatGPT plugin, actually. So the only thing which is missing is our AI plugin.json file. Let's go ahead. Let's paste that in. And this file, this is just a manifest file for ChatGPT that ChatGPT will use to determine when and how to use our plugin. For example, it will use this description for a model to determine when to use our plugin. Let's go ahead and let's run this. Luckily, we're in a code space, so it just works. And we get the publicly accessible endpoint, which is exactly what we need in order to go to ChatGPT and register our plugin. So let's go to ChatGPT and let's register our plugin. So this plugin is not deployed yet anywhere. We're just using the endpoint that the code space is providing us. And let's go ahead and let's install it. ChatGPT will verify our manifest, and it's installed.
Super easy.
Super easy, right?
Yeah.
But, you know, we should be polite, so we should say, hi, ChatGPT. That's the first thing, how you start this. And just so we see that for queries like this, they will not be forwarded to our plugin.
Right.
Right?
You want to see that kind of like ChatGPT is working on its own.
Yeah, as usual. It's polite as usual. So let's actually ask something which is related to our tech podcasts. Let's ask ChatGPT to list the names of our tech podcasts in plain text. Let's see. It seems like we got an issue, but
Well, it looked like it found your plugin there.
yeah, it found our plugin. Let's try one more time.
Did you write that error string, or it just kind of failed and it wrote that error string for you?
So it seems like we're getting an issue here. Let's see what's going on. For some reason, let's try it one more time. So ChatGPT nicely classifies this plugin, but for some reason it seems like we're hitting an issue. Let's try it one more time, and then we have another account that we can try. So our port is public. Let's try with another account just to be.
This is all live code.
This is all live code, yes. And my friend Joe Binder gave me another account that we can now go into. We will again use ChatGPT. We will go again to install our plugin. And now we cannot find the manifest file. Let's make sure that we start this code space one more time. Let's ask ChatGPT to search for our manifest. And it found our manifest. That's great. Let's go ahead, let's install our plugin. And let's try again to ask ChatGPT to list the names of my tech podcasts in plain text. ChatGPT will classify this query, and it will then use our plugin in order to answer this. Let's see if this will work now. So it's pinging our,
Awesome.
Awesome. Here are the names coming right in.
Those are a lot of the podcasts that I listen to.
Thank you, thank you. Those are great podcasts, but this is just the tip of the iceberg. We just pinged one API endpoint. Let's ask something more complex.
Sure.
I know we both love the Hansel Minutes from Scott Hanselman.
Yeah, it's classic.
Right, it's a classic one. So let's go ahead and let's ask to summarize the latest episode of the Hansel Minutes podcast in a style of a tweet, live from Build. We're live at Build. Oh, seems like we got an issue. But the cool feature of ChatGPT is that we can expand each of these requests. We can see what error we got, and we can see what endpoint ChatGPT was hitting. We see it's the get show by ID endpoint. So let's just put a breakpoint right there, and let's debug it straight from ChatGPT. So I just went here, and let's now regenerate this response. We saw that the error was that the response was too large. We have to be mindful of limitations of prompts for large language models. It might be that we are returning too large of a response. And we see that we beautifully hit the breakpoint. We see it in the tab.
Nice.
So now we're debugging straight from ChatGPT. Isn't this awesome?
Yeah, it's great.
Right?
Great.
So let's see what's going on here, actually. OK, so we see the author is Scott Hanselman, as expected. Whoa. And it looks like Scott Hanselman loves his podcasts. There's 800 episodes of the podcast, which is great for you and me as listeners.
He is prolific.
Right? But it gives too large of a response.
Yeah.
So let's just return the latest 20 episodes if the request is coming from ChatGPT. But I never know if I should use array splice or slice when I'm working. It's just confusing. Let's ask Copilot to help here. So let's go ahead and let's ask Copilot if ChatGPT is making this request, send only the first 20 episodes. Awesome, looks great, right? And the nice thing about this inline experience is that I'm still in control. I'm still the pilot, I can review this, and I can edit this as I think is best. We still have the great debugging support of VS Code, so let's just debug this right here. So we can see that the user agent has ChatGPT, but is not equal to ChatGPT. So let's just change this live. So I get the great VS Code IntelliSense, as I would expect here. And now this looks pretty good. Let's just go ahead. Let's accept this. That's great. Let's run our app one more time to make sure that the changes are applied. Great, and let's go back to ChatGPT. So now we expect that ChatGPT will do orchestration, which is the magic, which is combining multiple API endpoints in order to get the response. The first response will return 20 podcast episodes. ChatGPT will figure out what is the latest episode. From the latest episodes, it will ping our summarization endpoint and will then transform that in a style of a tweet, live from Build.
That's awesome.
Here we are, right?
That's great. So it's basically, it's combining the power of your application with the power of the foundational LLM model from OpenAI to actually create new content that actually gets your podcast app more users.
Absolutely.
That's really incredible.
Absolutely, yeah. So with VS Code and code spaces, you have everything you need for a smooth inner development loop of a ChatGPT plugin.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, Amanda.
All right. Thanks, Izzy. At the beginning of this session, I mentioned that it was my personal mission to really unleash dev creativity. So now you've seen just how easy it is to take an everyday app and turn it into an intelligent app. And so I'd really encourage all of you to think about your own public APIs and put your brain power behind turning them into something incredible. Check out the sample code at that aka.ms link so that you can get started on this yourself. Now, we've covered a lot of ground today. We talked about how GitHub Copilot chat in Visual Studio and VS Code can save you time and reduce toil, and how Microsoft DevBox is improving dev team velocity by making it easier to collaborate with consistency and quality in a hybrid-first world, and how Azure deployment environments and GitHub Advanced Security for Azure DevOps are empowering devs and dev infra teams alike, and of course, how truly easy it is to make any app an intelligent app. As developers, you're tasked with building the apps and the services and infrastructure that really moves our world forward. And we believe that these innovations will help you and your teams move forward too. Our vision has always been to empower you to set up a complete engineering system in seconds, contribute from any device, build from any platform, collaborate with anybody, and scale with confidence. And now we're living in a world where that vision is a reality. Thank you so much for being here today, and happy coding.